Hey, I'm Nancy Cavey, National ERISA and Individual Disability Attorney. Welcome to Winning Isn't Easy. Before we get started, I have to give you a legal disclaimer. This is not legal advice, but I will tell you that nothing will ever prevent me from giving you an easy to understand overview of the disability insurance world, the games the carriers play, and what you need to know to get the disability benefits you deserve. So off we go. Do you suffer from tinnitus, Meniere's disease, or some other profound hearing loss? Today, I'm going to be walking you through the hallmark indicators of a few hearing loss disorders, how those who suffer from the disease tackle disability claims, and tell you a real life story about a claimant that I'm representing in the claim of the problems that you can see or experience in a Meniere's disease case. So, even if you don't have a profound hearing loss, I think you're still going to find some useful tidbits. So I'm going to talk about 4 topics. First, I'm going to do an overview of hearing loss disorders and how disability carriers evaluate hearing loss, tinnitus, and Meniere's disease, how disability carriers view hearing loss, tinnitus, and Meniere's disease claims, the medical testing you have to have for a profound hearing loss disorder, and how UNUM got slammed in a Meniere's disease case, and the lessons you can learn. So let's take a break. Welcome back to Winning Isn't Easy. I'm going to tell you a story about how UNUM got slammed in a Meniere's disease case and the lessons you can learn. Meniere's disease is a disorder of the inner ear, and it causes severe dizziness, known as vertigo, ringing in the ear, known as tinnitus, hearing loss, a feeling of fullness or congestion in the ears, and sometimes even nauseousness and vomiting. Attacks can come on suddenly or after a short period of tinnitus or muffled hearing. In fact, there really isn't any one particular cause of an attack. And what's more difficult about these cases is that the frequency of these symptoms can vary from person to person. Now, some people will have a single attack of dizziness that can be separated by a long period of time. Others will have attacks over a number of days. Some people will have vertigo so severe that they lose their balance and fall. Unfortunately, there is no cure for the disease. But there are a variety of treatments, and the disability carrier is going to expect that you have explored the variety of treatments. Now, they can include salt-restrictive diets, cognitive therapy for anxiety, antibiotics, medication, steroid injections in the middle ear, and surgery. And you do have the right to refuse some of this, the invasive testing and treatment, rather, because of the potential consequences and complications of this treatment. But I'm going to tell you the story of Ms. Dwyer, who was a UNUM policyholder, and she had Meniere's disease. She had nauseousness and vertigo on an infrequent basis. And as a result of toxic shock syndrome, ultimately she had both of her legs amputated below the knee. Now, despite having the Meniere's disease, despite having both of her legs amputated below the knee, she continued to work for many years until her Meniere's symptoms just became so bad that she couldn't continue. She had been working at a company called P.H. Glatfelter as a projects and portfolio manager. And her symptoms had worsened so that by 2017, she was having vertigo, dizziness, and vomiting on a constant basis. And as a result, she stopped working. She applied for her short-term disability benefits, and UNUM approved the claim, and her employer provided the 6 months of short-term disability benefits. And of course, when that ended, she applied for her long-term disability benefits. But guess what UNUM did? It not only denied the long-term disability claim, but they said she'd never been entitled to those benefits because she was never disabled during what's called the elimination period. She appealed, and ultimately this case ended up in front of a federal judge. And the judge was fortunately able to use what's called a de novo standard of review, which meant that the judge was able to substitute its judgment for that of UNUM. And the judge slammed UNUM for its failure to follow a claims handling agreement that it had entered into in 2004. And they have been sued by a number of attorney generals because of their deceptive claims handling practices. And I will tell you that practically every disability carrier uses deceptive claims handling practices. Now, UNUM had agreed that they wouldn't use biased medical reviewing physicians, that they would give significant weight to the opinion of treating physicians. They would consider all of the disabling medical conditions and give significant weight to a Social Security award. And of course, UNUM has never really lived up to that agreement, and they didn't live up to that agreement in this case. The judge found in this case that UNUM had ignored the significance of her double amputation in the context of the Meniere's disease. So we had the double amputation, we had the Meniere's disease, but then we had the interaction of the amputation and the Meniere's disease. Because Meniere's disease leads to dizziness, vertigo, and a lack of balance, that could be a problem with someone who had amputations, and that could increase your risk or your fear of falling and cause, psychological distress. UNUM had based its denial on its peer review observations that there was a lack of escalation of treatment and the low use of medication. In other words, they were criticizing the medical care, and that's a common carrier tactic. The court noted that Dwyer had reached a plateau where the effectiveness of the medication was limited, and other treatment was invasive and potentially dangerous. Remember, I said you don't have to engage in invasive or dangerous treatment or treatment you perceive to be dangerous. The peer review doctor felt that it was important and noteworthy that Dwyer's physicians had never personally observed active Meniere symptoms. Well, that was wrong, but I will tell you, rarely do I see when my clients are examined by the physician that are actually having an active episode. But in this particular case, she had, and her doctors had noted it in the medical records, and the peer review doctor just blew through that. Now, UNUM conducted surveillance and scoured her social media posts for any signs of a normal life. And she reported on Facebook that she made salads. And UNUM pointed to that as evidence she wasn't disabled. And the court said that equating the ability to make a salad with an inability to work was patently absurd. And I would agree with them, particularly when the surveillance has nothing to do with the person's work activities, and particularly when the surveillance activity is being, or the activity that's being observed is at a point in time when the person isn't having an episode. Does a disability carrier think you're going to sit on your butt your entire life and avoid trying to live a full life, even if you have a disabling Meniere symptoms of dizziness or nauseousness? I would hope not, but obviously you would be limiting your activity and it would impact your ability to work when you're having an episode. And once you've recovered from that episode, be it hours or days, then obviously you have some capacity to work. Now, that capacity to work can also be subject to environmental factors. So, for example, if you're working in a loud environment that impacts your ability to hear, or a stressful environment that can lead to attack, then even if you are, quote unquote, not having symptoms, the environment of your work location or activities can actually, in my view, be a significant factor in a disability claim. But ultimately, the judge in this case rejected UNUM's request that the claim be remanded back to UNUM for another decision, meaning another denial. And the judge simply said, no. The judge said in this case, and this is one of my favorite quotes, in a real world terms, to adopt UNUM's position and grant a full remand would render litigation by the claimants, such as Ms. Dwyer, a virtual impossibility because the claimants would repeatedly have to climb a steep mountain only to return to its base again and to seek benefits under a disability plan. I think that was a great way to stick it to UNUM and potentially to other disability carriers. I hope you've enjoyed this week's episode of Winning Isn't Easy. If you've enjoyed this episode, consider liking our page, leaving a review, or sharing it with your friends and family. And please subscribe to this podcast this week. That way, you'll know every time that a new episode comes out. Thanks for joining us, and I look forward to hearing from you about your Meniere's or hearing loss disability claim.